All right. Welcome, everyone, to Direct Cash and Public Benefit Systems, Advancing Solutions to Address Poverty and Streamline Support Delivery. My name is Jennifer Kellett, and I will be moderating our session today, along with Leah Kraft and Chelsea Wilkinson, who will be providing our behind-the-scenes support. So before we start, I'd like to give a brief overview on how to use Crowdcast. If you'd like to submit a question for the speakers, please post in the Ask a Question section down below. You may also vote on questions already posted by other attendees, and this will help us determine which questions to prioritize. We encourage you to post questions throughout our discussion. However, we will wait until the last 10 minutes to address questions. There's also a chat box on the side where you can introduce yourself and hold side conversations. This is where we'll post any links and supplemental information. And this is also where you can reach Leah and Chelsea if you have any technical assistance issues. In order to keep things moving, the speakers and I won't be actively viewing any activity in the chat, so please make sure to submit any questions in the Ask a Question section. All right, so onto the session. So today we'll be discussing the myriad opportunities Direct Cash offers to re-envision our public benefit system. It can act both as a complement to existing benefits and as an alternative approach to administering critical assistance. Direct Cash is already being embraced internationally as a low-cost method to deliver aid that is flexible, effective, and dignified. As the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated public interest in basic income and direct cash in the US, public benefit systems have started to re-examine the possibilities that direct cash solutions offer. Today, we discuss 3 different ways direct cash is being explored and applied within the context of public benefits in the US to address poverty and improve the delivery of critical financial supports. The first approach uses direct cash as an alternative distribution method for assistance offered through existing public benefit programs. And this approach is represented by the City of Philadelphia and Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation's PHL Housing Plus pilot. The second approach re-envisions the way public benefit programs are designed by reallocating funding from existing public benefit programs to unconditional direct cash models. This approach is represented by UpTogether, which has worked with several states to implement guaranteed income pilots using TANF funding. The final approach we discussed today is basic income as a supplement to existing benefits. This is an approach that is represented by the Social Security Administration and Humanity Forward Foundation, who in partnership with the University of Pennsylvania are developing the Guaranteed Income and Financial Treatment Trial. So to help us explore this topic today, we are joined by 3 dedicated and innovative speakers who have been on the front lines of implementing these approaches. So I'm going to pass things over to Ryan to start our introductions.
Thank you. My name is Ryan Ambrose. I am the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative Director at the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation. We are a quasi-public development arm of the City of Philadelphia, and we are implementing the Guaranteed Income pilot on behalf of the city. I'm sorry, I want to now pass it over to Mary.
Hi, so I'm Mary. I work at UpTogether, formerly known as the Family Independence Initiative, and we've been supporting families for over 20 years. And just in the last 2 years alone, we've distributed over $150 million in unrestricted, unconditional cash to hundreds and thousands of people in all 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico. We operate over 50 multi-payment direct cash pilots. And in my role as the National Partnership Strategy Director, I ensure that we all have the tools and resources and strategies to better achieve our visions and invest in the strengths of individuals to build their social and financial assets. And so I hope to share a few examples of our partnerships, specifically with human service organizations, to launch guaranteed income aligned pilots. And I just want to name a few because I might mention them in my discussion. In Massachusetts, we have the Trust and Invest Collaborative, which is a multi-year pilot serving over 1,000 families in direct partnership with the Massachusetts Department of Transitional Assistance and a collaboration with Harvard-based research team. In Chicago, we're working directly with the Chicago Department of Health and Human Services, who are providing some of those direct-to-family funds. And in Oregon, we're partnering with the Department of Human Services using TANF designated dollars to provide 12-month cash payments to rural residents. And this partnership has also influenced a soon-to-be launched $11 million partnership with the state of Tennessee, also supported by TANF dollars. And then I will pass it on to Joanne.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Joanne Cobb. I am currently the acting director of the Office of Research and Demonstration at the Social Security Administration. And we're currently planning for a guaranteed income and financial treatment trial, we're calling it GIFT, with the Humanity Forward Foundation and the University of Pennsylvania. So this is going to be a guaranteed income and financial treatment trial that will test the effectiveness of providing guaranteed income to cancer patients. So we'll be recruiting volunteers who meet certain medical and financial eligibility requirements and have certain annual household incomes. And then they'll be at 3 different cancer treatment centers in Philadelphia. So the intervention group will receive monthly GI payments for over 12 months at $1,000 a month specifically. This is something we have not tested before. We're very interested in looking at this guaranteed income as a sort of a pilot, and we look forward to working with the Humanity Forward Foundation and the University of Pennsylvania as we get this going and get it off the ground.
Great. We're looking forward to it too. So my name is Jennifer Kellett, she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Programs with Humanity Forward Foundation. So my work in the basic income space includes coalition building, negotiating benefit protections, and providing benefits technical assistance and payment distribution support for pilots. So if you have any questions or comments about our discussion today or Humanity Forward Foundation's work, please feel free to reach out to me after the session. All right, so to kick off our discussion, I'd first like to ask our speakers to share what led you to explore basic income and cash payments as part of your respective projects. So Joanne, would you like to share first?
As I said, we're always looking for ways to obviously support the beneficiary. And in this project in particular, we're going to be supporting in particular cancer patients. And this would be individuals who are receiving SSI, if they are receiving SSI. And, our interest is if this is something that works, we want to eventually work with our policy department to make some changes if we can to help individuals that are in specific situations. So when the foundation came to us, we certainly, we jumped at the chance to be able to look at this. So it's something that we've been interested in for a while, and this is an opportunity that was presented. So we're very excited about it.
Great. Ryan, can you share a little bit about how your pilot came to be?
Sure. And I kind of jumped the gun a little bit and didn't give a little brief overview of what our pilot is. So
go ahead.
Yeah. I'll get that out of the way real fast and then address the question. But so our pilot, Phil Housing Plus, is really a research study in partnership with the University of Pennsylvania. And we will be pulling participants off the Philadelphia Housing Authority's housing choice voucher waitlist. And we're really trying to do an apples to apples comparison between a group of 300 people, families that we've pulled off the list, who will be receiving a benefit that is calculated in a sense the same way that a voucher would be calculated. And we're going to track those people over 3 years while also tracking a control group of families that have recently received a voucher from the PHA. So this has been in work since pre-pandemic. The Kenney administration signed on to Mayors for Guaranteed Income, and that is really kind of took a back seat once the pandemic hit and other immediate needs needed to be addressed. But COVID-19 certainly showed the need and the importance of these studies. So if there's a silver lining, we're kind of going into this study with that experience behind us. And there's a lot of pros and cons that we're interested to see, and that's why we're doing a comprehensive research and using UPenn, which is a great research partner, kind of to see how this is an easier source of assistance for tenants as compared to the traditional voucher program, which can be very heavy in administrative oversight, addressing bias that, whether intentional or unintentional, from a landlord or other people in the community. And, just really the flexibility that this allows to address a family's needs, which is, going back to the pandemic, something we saw that was a big benefit when, the income or the assistance payments were going out to especially very low income families.
Right, those flexible dollars, critical. Great. Mary, would you like to share a little bit about how you guys started using direct cash or thinking about TANF as well in terms of those funds?
Yes, because, UpTogether, formerly known as the Family Independence Initiative, we've been in this sort of direct cash game for a very long time. And for us, it's all based in relationships. I feel like every pilot I tell you about, it'll be like, well, we talk to these people, we talk to these people. And so you'll see that as a theme. And so our very first sort of TANF related fund was a small fund in rural Oregon for Jefferson and Lincoln County in direct partnership with the state. And that relationship began because of a relationship we had with Multnomah County, the county where Portland, Oregon is. And so you might have heard Mary Lee speak earlier in this conference, and we worked with her many, many years ago. And so basically, they heard what we were doing in a different office in the state of Oregon, and they thought, well, isn't that interesting, like what you all do? And I thought, so it really is just based on relationships and being like, let's try this, let's do something different, and really finding those really flexible partners who want to test and see, like, how are our families still thriving when we give them fewer barriers and hoops to jump through, and when we just give them that direct cash. And I think especially when it comes to TANF, I'd like to share just a few facts about our research. Our policy team at UpTogether has been looking at this, and looking at the latest data from the Center on Budget Policies and Priorities. 1/5 of combined federal and state TANF dollars is spent on basic assistance for families. Only like a little over 1/5 goes to basic assistance, and those are TANF dollars. In TANF's first year in 1997, states only allocated 71% of their funds to the program for and so they're also not even allocating all of the funds that they do have. So only 71% got allocated, and that was in the first year. But now by 2020, and that's the latest data that we have, only 22% of annually allocated federal dollars is even being allocated. So this money is just kind of sitting there. It's not being distributed, and only knowing that a small percentage goes to direct assistance in general. Just think about like the money that's sitting out there and not happening. And so, since only a small percentage goes to direct assistance, you might ask, where does this money go to then? Because we know it exists. And so, it includes great, amazing programs like Head Start, after school programs, reproductive health support, things that I'm not, it's not a bad thing to support, but that this isn't what the money was designated for. And in reality, the states are using TANF dollars to plug budget holes for things that they should be doing otherwise. And so, this is just one innovative way to use TANF dollars, and we'd love to see it replicated and used in using the full budget and giving it directly to families.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. I had no idea about the amount of TANF that was allocated in proportion to how much is given. So that's really great information to share. Thank you. And we dropped a link about that information as well in the chat if anyone wants to read further on that. Great. Well, let's move on to our next question. So the rules and regulations of many means-tested benefit programs are not supportive of the receipt or distribution of cash. So how are you working towards adapting these programs to be more inclusive of cash as a concept, either in this temporary stage of pilots or potentially as a future program reality? Joanne, would you like to start?
I had to get off mute. Yeah, let me start by saying that many of you may know SSI is a means tested program, and other income can reduce that payment. So when we're in a situation where we're looking at guaranteed income or unearned income, obviously that has to be taken into account. So what we're allowed to do with the research is have waivers that allow those who are receiving SSI to receive the monthly, in this case, the gift payment, without offsetting their SSI payment, and we remove the resource limit for those individuals that are in the study and getting the intervention for a period. So we're allowed to do that. But that's in our research mode. Obviously, what we'd like to see is if we find that this has some impact, this could certainly help to shape policies in the future. But I think it's also important to note that a lot of times when we're setting these studies up, it takes a very long time to coordinate and work with the different parts of the agencies, making sure that the policy, the waiver is in place and that sort of thing. So it does take a lot of time, and I know a lot of people say, oh, you do this research, whatever comes of it. We do see changes, and we hope that we will see changes with this, but the slow wheels do turn with the federal government, as everybody can imagine, and we certainly hope that that we're able to have some impact here, which is why we test it first. So yeah.
Right. And we'll probably touch on that a little bit more in our challenges question too about that. So I appreciate you highlighting that. Great. Mary, can you share a little bit about sort of, again, how you guys are sort of working to adapt these programs potentially, or think about how they might be changed to be more supportive of cash?
Certainly. And I think, one thing I always hear when I'm like, how can we adapt to the system? And I'm like, how can the system adapt to us and the people's needs and the people who we are supporting? And how, we try to offer on UpTogether, we do have a, platform where folks can receive their payments and they can answer survey questions, and we can, do an evaluation and bring in social networks. But we hope to make that as simple as possible to bring people on board and not have to bring every single piece of personal data. And, don't make people work hard to prove that they're poor and prove that they're struggling. And so I think, it's removing those barriers. And for me, the way to do that is to, when we are working together, when we are planning these pilots, let's bring the systems to the table. So for example, in our Trust and Invest collaborative partnership is directly ideated for years. It's a years-long relationship with the Department of Transitional Assistance. And so they are fully on board because, they helped ideate, they helped co-create, and they're going to, they helped draw what they wanted to see and what they wanted to learn, so that, as we're launching this pilot is already launched and live, we know that, they're coming forward to the table. They're the ones who found the loophole to, get a SNAP waiver. They're the ones who have publicly committed to, learning from the evaluation and making policy change. Like, we can at UpTogether, we can say, we're going to do this, we're going to fight for this, but knowing that you have the institution at the table and finding an institution that is strengths-based and not deficit-based is also, very important. And so for us, it's, learning, making it simple, but also already forging the right relationships and the right connections as you are building it, and not after. Not saying, here, this is what we did, but making it a co-collaboration, not only with the people, especially with the people who you are supporting, and also with the institutions that you're trying to change.
Definitely. And I think we'll dig into more on that in our resources section, like what resources are critical for getting these things off the ground. And I know a common theme has been those partnerships, right? They're so critical. Ryan, I'd love to pass it over to you. Same question. how can we adapt some of these rules and regulations to be more supportive of cash?
Well, I think, for our program, as I mentioned, it's an apples to apples comparison, or as much as we can, between an unrestricted cash assistance and a housing choice voucher. And if you're receiving a housing choice voucher, all of these means tested benefits, aren't impacting, aren't being counted as income. Money that we would receive if we didn't get waivers would be counted as incomes, and then people would be losing all these benefits, which is not very useful if we're trying to, compare these two groups. So to kind of build off something that Joanne said, these things take time. And, since we've been working on this, the biggest time suck has been getting as many waivers as we possibly can. And, and I know for a lot of people, basically everybody that's probably listening in knows how difficult that is. So it's been a lot of back and forth. And, I think I'll talk more about the waivers a little bit later, I'm sure, but, they are incredibly important for us. And, I think just what change needs to happen is at the state and federal level, there needs to be more of a movement to kind of accept these direct cash payments just like any other benefit. If you're receiving a voucher, you're receiving a direct cash payment, you need to treat them the same.
Great. Yeah. And actually, that's a great lead into our next question, which is basically like, what does it take to implement direct cash in support of these models? And like, what are the biggest challenges you guys have been facing and continue to face in implementing? So Ryan, I'd love you to speak more on that. I know you were talking about sort of getting all the sub-agreements in place as well was a challenge.
So that's, the waiver thing, like I just said, is massively important. We've gotten a good amount of waivers, TANF, a couple others that I'm just like blanking on right now. There's certain benefits that we're going to unfortunately just going to have to counsel potential applicants out of the program because we just don't want them, like SSI and some other benefits that are out there. There's nothing we can do to really compensate for that. Now, SNAP, which we are unable to get a waiver for, but a majority of the population that is going to be eligible for our program is most likely receiving SNAP. Sorry, I do have a little bit of a feedback, so it's a little hard to.
You're okay on my end.
Okay, so it's a little distracting for me. So one of the challenges is knowing that SNAP was going to be an issue. We had to budget in a hold harmless fund. So anybody that participates in our pilot is probably going to lose their SNAP benefits. So, and because this is an apples to apples comparison, not only are they getting the value of a voucher, they're also going to get the value of the SNAP benefits launch. Because if you had a voucher, you would not lose your SNAP benefits. Right. And that's a very important part. That's very important to us for the study and to get as much information out of this as we can that nobody is being adversely affected for participating in this pilot. And the other things that are for us very challenging and has been time consuming is because this is a partnership between the city, PHDC, which we are a quasi-public agency, the PHA, which we are using their wait list, and our research partners at UPenn. There's a lot of data sharing agreements, MOUs, concerns about data security, which obviously we're, worked very hard to make sure that we're not sharing any PII. Wow. But some of the other things that we've talked about internally that we can't really address in this pilot, but we're aware of, and the research is going to hopefully pick up, is when you're receiving a voucher from HUD, there's a lot of stuff that goes into getting that voucher. There's a lot of hands-on administrative work at the beginning. The landlord is participating. There's an inspection of the property. You're not allowing people to go into substandard housing. In our direct cash payment, it's unrestricted. You technically, if you don't pay your rent, you don't pay your rent. But we have no means, or nor should we really, to actually be checking where participants are living. the assumption and what we hope to see is that people are making responsible choices for them and their family. And that's one of the really important things that we want to get out of this research, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, a lot of people just assuming that people for getting direct cash benefits are going to abuse it. We know from the studies that are already out there that that's really not the case. So that's another thing that we're really hoping to see with the research.
Yeah, I love that you highlighted that, because I think that is a question of like, how do we give people more choices and help reduce stigma, but also, make sure that people have access to quality housing, especially when there might be those unequal power dynamics between a tenant and a landlord. And, in traditional voucher program, you have HUD that sort of has more authority to help the person work through that. So I think that's an excellent point you raise of how it could be a double-edged sword sometimes in terms of making sure people are still supported in important ways to make sure they're getting the quality housing that they deserve. Great. Love to pass it over to, I lost my train of thought. Let's go for Mary. Can you speak to a little bit about the challenges that you guys have been facing?
Yeah, I think this one is particularly specific to our organization and the way that, we, before COVID, decided to go completely online. And before we we were a site-based model. So we had sites in this city and that city and the city across the country. And when we sort of disbanded those sites, we sort of lost those in-person community connections. And obviously, when you are building these pilots, community connections are everything. They're completely essential. And so again, it's all about the relationships and the word of mouth. But I think really it's, building connections in the community where you are trying to support and uplifting those voices in the process. So that has been a challenge in the transition. And, we are working with strategies to make sure that, we have our community members, our people on the ground, and we are learning from them about, what do they want to see? What changes, do they want in their lives, and really trusting and recognizing their, initiative in their ability to improve their lives and giving them the flexibility to do that. I think I say community connections as well, because I think that enrollment process, that onboarding process can be a bit of a challenge for anybody trying to launch these pilots. And I just want to put out there that, having fewer requirements is always going to be a better benefit. I think, we have different partnerships with people who, want to make sure that, people are, have a certain income and they have to show their pay stubs, or people, they have to live in this specific zip code and have to require this, that, and that to prove everything. And, we've been pushing and challenging these partners to, simplify what we are requiring of our members, what we're requiring of our participants, because we don't want to become another program. We don't want to become another thing that makes this, difficult for people. We're all trying to reduce those barriers, reduce those hoops. And so that's one way that we try to reduce our own challenges to our participants.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on. Same question for Joanne.
Sure. I will. Let me just go back to just into the discussion about policies. I noticed that you all did put our link to our Social Security Administration Program Operations Manual. Not an exciting read, but certainly one that will allow you to see all of the policies that we have to be aware of when we're doing this kind of research. And something else to point out, as many of us have commented, this can be a lengthy process. Whenever we use a waiver, we're required to make sure that there's informed consent from the individuals that are participating, because as some of the panelists have mentioned, there could be consequences. And so we need to make sure that they're fully aware of what could happen as far as some of their benefit income, if indeed a waiver is not in effect and they're participating in one of our programs. And there can also be additional requirements. We're talking about some of the barriers that we face. Obviously, with the federal government, we have the Paper Reduction and Clearance Act. So all of our materials have to go through a clearance. Any information that we're collecting, has to be cleared. And obviously, we've been working through these issues with GIFT that you're very familiar with right now that we're dealing with. And another thing I should point out, we took on the GIFT project as an unsolicited proposal. As I said, the foundation came to us and we agreed to work on it. But right now, as many of you know, in the federal government, we're dealing with a lot of resource constraints, obviously, with just not having enough people to do a lot of the work. But so a lot of times that does stop us or not allow us to do some of the things that we want to do. But we, fortunately, we're able to do this. I do want to also, and I don't know if I should save this for resources, but we do have another program that we created last year that's designed to support new and innovative research. It's called the Interventional Cooperative Agreement Program, Icap. We allow external groups to just apply, to send in their ideas. And I can talk more about that maybe when we get to resources, but I wanted to point out that we are looking for other ways to be able to accommodate a lot of this research without the resources. And this was one way that we were able to do it. If somebody applies for the grant, obviously we'll oversee and assist with data management agreements and that sort of thing, data sharing agreements. But the ICAP really allows the individuals to do their work, the organizations that apply, and then there's less requirement on us as far as having the manpower, the resources on site to do the work. So, but I can talk about that when we get into the resources later, and I think we'll probably share a link about that as well. But yeah, I think everybody else covered all of the the barriers that we face, but just keeping in mind that especially when you're getting informed consents, there's so many clearances that we have to go through. So
definitely, thank you for highlighting that. And our discussion has been so great that we're running a little late on time. So what I'm going to do is actually take our resource question to our Q&A portion, because there's a question about that. So we'll kind of address that there. And I'm going to sort of combine our last two questions, which were about sort of what impacts you guys are hoping to see come out of this work, if any. And then sort of maybe next steps for your work. So if this first round is successful, would you be thinking about expanding? What would need to be done differently? Would there be additional considerations that you would need to be thinking about if we wanted to do this on a broader scale? And I know that's going to be different for each of your projects. So Ryan, I'd like to start with you, and I'm sorry we're kind of compressing two things into one, but go ahead.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I think, what we want to see is that these programs are effective and that they are helping the people we're trying to help. And, we're really looking forward to seeing what the research shows. Granted, that'll be like in 4 years from now. But, moving forward, I think for a program like ours to continue is we really need federal buy-in. That would be the easiest source or easiest path to get to where we need to be. But at the end of the day, the program as we have set up in Philadelphia isn't sustainable without the federal buy-in. And frankly, kind of the money that goes into it, you really need state buy-in. Previous to my position in Philadelphia, I was with the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. And the state of Massachusetts has a voucher program that is modeled off of a housing choice voucher program. So, at the state level, it's certainly possible for a state to run their own program, but they would, of course, run into the same waiver issues with some federal benefits.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Mary, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can share some of the impact data we have from our previous in-person model, which is, direct cash payments they received. It was a lower level than I think a lot of our other funds. It was $3,200 over 2 years, and through that we saw a 23% increase in monthly income, a 77% increase in business income for folks who had businesses, and participants more than doubled their savings and liquid assets. And so that was at a much lower level than I think some of our other pilots are going. And so we'd love to see increases in that way, in addition to, mental health, general health, family improvements, things that we've been learning on a qualitative way from stories and from our members. And yeah, we hope to learn more and hope to continue to see all of those positive impacts.
Wonderful. All right, Joanne, I'm going to pass to you.
Yeah, so I think what we hope to see, I think we've highlighted that a lot in our, and I see that you did put the Icap link up there. I really appreciate you doing that. We highlighted a lot of what we're looking for in the Icap. For example, eliminating structural barriers in the labor market, including for racial, ethnic, and underserved communities, including people with disabilities. Obviously, that's one of our interests. And, in order to increase the likelihood of people receiving or applying for DI or SSI benefits. We also, want to, be able to look at areas that are promoting self-sufficiency, obviously, because we do understand that a lot of our beneficiaries, they do want to work. It's just a matter of figuring out what they're able to do with their new limitations often. And then we have, there's about 5 major points when you go to the Icap link that we cover. Other areas are, assisting claimants in the underserved communities who apply for or appeal decisions or claims in their DI or SSI benefits. We're trying to increase, conducting outreach to people with disabilities who could potentially be beneficiaries. So we're doing some work around that as well. And I did want to point out that because we thought this might be useful also, is that to note that SSA really looks to determine whether unearned income counts for SSI purposes. And I think we're going to get some of that information with this gift project. And we've already seen the program operations manual, where I think you can see some of the policies that we're dealing with, and how we count and look at unearned income. I think that's important to be very familiar with. And then I wanted to point out a couple other funding sources, policies that are policies distinguished to funding sources. The assistance based on need, referred to as ABON, and this is in the POMS manual. It's funded, that would be assistance that's funded wholly by state, including the District of Columbia, Indian tribes, and Northern Mariana Islands, a political subdivision of a state or a combination of such jurisdictions. That would be called assistance based on need. And then we also have income based on need, funded wholly or partially by federal or government non-governmental agencies. So I think these are important factors to keep in mind when we're talking about guaranteed income, so that people are aware of kind of the hoops that we have to jump through, and the waivers, as many of us have already mentioned, that have to be dealt with. But I think, I do believe that we're trying to resolve some of that by having the Icap program and hoping we get more applicants, so that we can continue to kind of do this research and figure out what other policies we can adjust or change, or waive if we need to. So that's
great. I'm going to move us to Q&A for the last 5 minutes. Thank you guys so much for that wealth of information. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to prioritize the questions that receive the most votes. So if you have not voted and you want to push a question up on the list, let me know. Make sure to do that now so I make sure to get to it. We can stay on for a few minutes after the official end at 3:15 if people would like. Otherwise, they're more than welcome to head off at the end of the official session. So this touches on our resources. So if you could have one resource, it could be monetary, person or organizational support, technical support, etc., to help you in your work, what would it be? So I know we've talked a lot about partnerships, but anyone can feel free to answer on that one. So one resource that would be really helpful for you.
I would go back to saying federal support. That, you know, the Hold Harmless Fund that I mentioned earlier is a big budget suck. You know, we could either help more people or extend the pilot for a little longer, but it's a lot of money that is going into just accounting for SNAP benefits, not even anything else.
All right. Anyone else want to touch on that one? No? All right, we'll keep it moving. So in the panel, we've been discussing ways to simplify processes and make things easier for organizations, governments, and participants in these projects. So what simplifications would you make or recommend for consideration?
I can jump in there. And I think, you know, if you are working directly with these social systems and services and really asking them what kind of impact data do they want? What kind of evaluation do they want? Do we have to have an RCT for every single thing we do? Or is there something that is, you know, less expensive, less intensive for the participants where we can learn from their experience and learn from their change through different through different ways to survey and evaluate? But for me, it is, you know, I think that's one way that I think I'd love to see a lot of these different pilots simplify, is not having to have this major evaluation that has to be published in a journal, because we know, and there's already so many that are happening, we know that cash works. We have this, it's global, and there are other ways to learn, and it doesn't always have to be a university-based RCT necessarily. And so if there's any way to push the types of data we are collecting and the ways that we do collect data so that it's simpler on the budget and on the participants, that is a win for me.
Wonderful. Okay, this question comes from Larry. Any suggestions as to what steps legislatively at the federal and/or state level we can push to streamline full coverage waivers for recipients enrolled in any government assistance programs while trying to partake in income-based trials, pilots, and demonstrations? So I get putting you guys on the spot. Like, how would we do it?
I mean, we've talked internally about, I think specific maybe to the way we've designed our pilot is if HUD just put out a directive that said treat direct cash pilots as just as you would a housing choice voucher. You know, that would, it keeps, I think I have a similar theme here that I'm just keep going back to here.
Right. Any other thoughts on that one?
I mean, you know, as a federal employee, I can't.
Yeah, that's fine.
I can say that, you know, I certainly have some ideas, but you were talking about federal buy-in, but I think too, we need people like some of these foundations and organizations to get political buy-in. You know, we do have research that's congressionally directed. And so, if there's some pressure and they come to us and they say, we want you to look at this, we'll certainly do that. And if it involves getting waivers, but there has to be some, you know, political buy-in as well as the federal buy-in. And obviously with the Icap program, we're hoping that sort of opens that door where the organizations start coming to us and we're able to try some, you know, look at some new things. But I think it's also a matter of some of these big organizations talking to their constituents, their representatives, and saying, this is something that my community is dealing with. We want to look at this. Can you make that happen? So.
And that's a great lead in, because I know we have to wrap up and Mary has to jump off. But I was going to say that's a great lead in for our afternoon plenary session, which is the politics of basic income, the strategy of a winning national policy. There we go. So you guys are welcome to join that session to learn more about work that is being done in the community to advance that. But I just wanted to thank everyone for sharing part of their Saturday with us, particularly our speakers. We really appreciate your expertise and your willingness to join us today. A recording of this session will be available when this broadcast ends using the same link that you used to register and join the session. And then, as always, you can check out the conference website for this full schedule. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and the rest of your day. Thank you again.
Thank you.